Hello, everybody. This is Jim Nowakowski from Interline Creative Group. This is our CEU on strategy in a world of constant disruption. And I think you'll all agree with me if you're listening to this, or when you listen to this, that this is a world in constant disruption, disruption, right? Let's get started. This is an AIA-approved course. We've got it approved by the AIA. We've got it approved by the IDCEC. So those of you who are going to listen to this will get full credit when you're done. And also the NKB approved this. So the three organizations that we've been with for a long time have blessed this course and take it to it. Now, this is also copyright by our organization, Interline Creative Group. However, at the end of this, you'll get my contact information. And if you're interested, you can always replay it, of course, but I'd be happy to send you the deck in a PDF file for your use and reference. Okay? Sure, if you have questions, you can email me, jim@interlinegroup.com, which I'll give you at the end. And we have some questions that other people we gave this to over the years have sent us. This course is for architects, designers, and professionals. It's about strategy. Strategy is the most important element of your business. I know if you're going to listen to this, regardless if maybe you're a manufacturer or a sales rep listening to this, ladies and gentlemen, there is no more important thing you can think about than strategy. With the right strategy, you can overcome any obstacle. With the wrong strategy, you're pretty much screwed. And in the age of disruption, which has been true since I've been in business over 30 plus years, especially in the crash of '09, you really need a good strategy to keep going. You really do, to last this long. I keep pinching myself. So we're going to review the timeless business fundamentals, which don't change. What changes is the technology around these fundamentals and how you use your strategy. But hopefully, when you're done with this course, you'll be able to hatch, refine, create your own strategy. And hopefully you have a strategy. We're going to talk about what that is. And I can give you the hint right now. Any strategy that you have or you're thinking of having, including big companies, small companies, it really doesn't matter. Anticipate, react, adapt. Those are the three most important words you're going to hear from me today. Anticipate, react, and adapt. You got to have objectives, but those three things formulate strategy. Ready? All right. By the end of the course, we're going to define, as I said, core principles of strategy and why they remain relevant. We're going to look at the sources of disruption. Have you looked at the sources of disruption? Besides your cell phone, your emails, your texts, right? We get disrupted all the time. I'm also going to show you perhaps one of the most important charts in your life. We're going to talk about this. We're going to differentiate between strategic approaches, defensive, offensive, flanking, and guerrilla strategies, courtesy of Trout and Rice. We'll talk about them. Foundational business questions to assess your internal positioning. Regardless if you're an architect, designer, manufacturer, sales rep, as I said, it doesn't matter what business you're in. You have to take a position in the marketplace. Are you a leader? Are you a follower? Do you own the market share? Do you want to gain market share? What market share do you have? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Also, customers. How many customers do you have? Some people, when I ask that question, say, not enough, Jim. Well, of course. You can have more than enough. In that case, you're going to get in trouble because you're going to lose some. And long-term planning. Ladies and gentlemen, strategy is not interested in the short term. Strategy is interested in the long game, not the short term. Short term is for what? Quick responses. When you're driving and the car turns in front of you, what do? You don't need a strategy to figure that out, do you? I know from the car accident in my lifetime, your strategy is to be a defensive driver. If you're a defensive driver, you know what you have to do when suddenly a car turns in front of you. If you are not a defensive, by the way, is one of the strategies, driver, you don't know what to do. So you just probably crash and hopefully you don't die. And we're going to reflect on past business challenges and reflect how strategic mindset. I'm going to try to challenge the way you think. Ah, Jim, I got that down pat. Well, maybe you do. Then you don't need this course. I always like this course because I always learn something from the questions I get asked afterwards. But more than that, it keeps me on my strategic toes. You can't have enough thought. Jim Mattis says he's a former Secretary of Defense. You have to think until your head hurts when you're doing strategy. And my head hurts a lot because I'm always thinking. Right? All right. Here we go. I want to start off by telling you your strategy is to stay in front of your customers. That's really what you have to do. And that's about service. I don't really care what business you're in. You're the greatest architect in the world, greatest designer, greatest manufacturer, greatest sales rep, greatest whatever. We are all in the service business. And therefore, staying in front of your customers, not to be obnoxious, but being there when they need you, is one of your objectives and part of your strategic development and part of your planning. You must be there, which means cross-selling will always be closing, looking for those opportunities. Listen for them. Listening, ladies and gentlemen, is becoming a lost art, is it not? Some of you have already tuned me out. Holy mackerel, how can I get you back? I should shout. Listening. I had a great salesman I worked with, Don Tickle. Great guy. Traveled to High Point Mark with him many times. He says, Jim, how do you learn anything when you're always talking? I said, I guess I better shut up, Don. Even if you hear an opportunity for another business, share it with that business. Give them the lead. Networking. That's what it's about. All right. I want you to think about this also from I read this book, Call Sign Chaos, a while ago, Jim Mattis. Digital technology. Think about this when you read this with me. Digital technology can falsely encourage remote staffs to believe they possess a God's eye view of combat. Digital technologies do not dissipate confusion. The fog of war can actually thicken when misinformation is instantly amplified. Ladies and gentlemen, do you feel this? Do you feel the quote? Do you know how much misinformation is out there about things, about your company, about my company, about everybody's company, about your work, about what you do, about who you talk to? And it's applied instantly because of these darn social media, which is probably the root cause of all the disruption. We just live in a fast-paced, rat-paced world, don't we? And so you got to be careful about what you're doing, why you do it, when you do it. And you can't be dragged down into the immediate response tunnel. Just don't go there. Do not go there. The guy on my right is David Ogilvy. He was a guy, I read his books. I never met the guy, but I know people who worked for Ogilvy and met Ogilvy. He was one of the founders of advertising thinking. He's a research guy that got into advertising. One of my heroes. Advertisers who ignore research are dangerous as generals who ignore the signs of the enemy. David Ogilvy said that. And that's why one of my premises of developing your strategy is to be constantly researching, listening. You cannot, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot listen enough. You can't do it. It's impossible. It's impossible because things are changing all the time. Heraclitus, the great Greek philosopher, says, all is a flowing. It's like a river. You can't put your foot in the river in the same place. Once you step in the river, because it's flowing. It's the same thing with your business. I had a guy who once said, Jim, I really admire you. You're in total control of your business. I said, John, I hate to tell you, I hate to break the bubble, but that's not true. What do you mean it's not true? It's not true. No one is in control of their business. They think they're in control. They may think they're in control. Oh, the accountant says I'm making money. That doesn't mean you're in control. You're not in control. Anticipate, react, and adapt. You have to constantly be doing that. Just look at all the companies today, what's going on, dare I say it. And when you listen to this, that dare I say it may be over. I'm gonna whisper a word now. When that thing is over, all this commotion about that thing is probably just the same thing that happened in the crash of '09 when the market tanked, which I lived through, or 9/11, which I lived through, right? Or COVID, which I lived through. You know, I got COVID. I caught COVID before they named it. It was an amazing experience. I'm still here. Holy mackerel. Do your homework, research every day. And if you don't know who you're selling to, you're just faking it. You've got to have your customer in mind. Oh, well, Jim, there are a lot of different types of people. I've done pro formas on, brand starting. No. Forget that. People are individuals. You can't put them in a bucket. Well, Gen Z. No. That's a nice category, but that's not what we're talking about. People are individuals. The minute you stop thinking like that, you're going to lose. Strategy is about thinking how you solve your problems. And your problem is getting and retaining customers. Because without customers, you don't have a business. And if you haven't realized, well, of course. And do you know how many businesses fail? Because they don't realize that. Some get lucky, right? Zuckerberg got lucky, right? But that doesn't matter for you and your business. You just need more growth. Who are you selling to? How do those people think? What platforms are they on? When did you see them last? We talked to a client when we did a program. We called it the Safari program. That's where we target a city and help them go out. This was a high-end consulting engineer for fire protection. We called it Safari. So he targeted an audience, right? His audience is architects. That's who bought his services and subcontracted to him. And when we started examining his file, we found out that he had not talked to his customers in the same building that he shared space with. This was a big office building in Chicago for 2 years. They would ride the same elevator sometimes and not acknowledge each other because people change jobs, right? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? So what do your customers need? That's what you keep asking yourself. So I'm going to give you 5 questions that we're going to kick off this discussion. And if you have a strategy, and you're going to take control of the answers to these questions. If you don't have a strategy, the world's going to answer them for you, right? How many customers do you have? You better know that question. I wonder how many of you listening to this know the exact number of how many you have and how long you've had them and why you lost them and why you gained them. Those are all strategy-based questions. The next question, how many do you want? Most people will say as many as I can get, which is the wrong answer. I just got a text from a guy trying to sell me services in a list. And I want to read it to you. I'm going to pull this up for a second. Give me a minute. Okay, I asked him, he's trying to sell me a list and get me leads. And I said, well, twice, 2 texts. I usually just delete the number and don't do it. For some reason, I kept this one. Maybe because I knew I was going to record this today. Sorry to bother you again. Would you be open to a chat? I said, no, we're just set on that front. His offer was basically, I've got a system to get phone numbers and emails whenever someone is looking for marketing help. It's a very compelling message, but I can get that. So I said, no, thanks. Where did you find me? And he said, I found you on LinkedIn. So you're at full capacity now and can't accept new clients? No, that's not what I said. I said, I don't need your system, but he didn't listen to me. So when we're done with the CEU, I'll go back and just delete his phone number. I won't talk to him anymore. People like that, and, they are always soliciting. You're soliciting. You don't want to be deleted. You don't want people to put your phone number in, in the junk pile and never to be answered again. So how many customers do you want? Are you in for the long-term relationship? We are. Our relationships last over 10 to 12 years with our clients. It's a long time for agents. What about your short-term goals and long-term goals? right? Think about these questions. Strategy can help you drive these answers. Okay? The basics of strategy is to know who you're shooting, who's your target audience, what they need, how they think, and to help you design an effective strategy to influence and achieve your ultimate goal. You have one goal in strategy, one. I told you what that goal is earlier. Stay in front of your customers. Why? To sell them something. Well, Jim, I don't want to be construed as a salesman. But you're a salesman. You're a salesperson. That's how you get business. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't realized this yet, every time you touch a customer or a customer touches you is a strategic opportunity. You know, some of my clients tell me publicly, Jim, you're always selling. A sales rep for a magazine died many years ago, and I went to the wake, and I found a publisher who I'd been after for a long time. And I said, after conveying sympathies and all that stuff, I said, well, I'd really like to touch base with you, next week to get a chance. And some of the people that were there with me couldn't believe I was doing that, pitching at a wake. I said, well, I'm not pitching, although I'm pitching, but I'm not pitching. I'm still respectful. And believe it or not, that turned out to be a good pitch because I got the client after 2 more months of conversation and dialogue. Always be selling, always. Your job is to influence the journey. Now, out of respect, sometimes you don't want to do it. I understand that, but if you don't have that in your mind all the time, listening for those opportunities, you're just going to miss them. They're going to fly right by you. How many of you know, and if you're not using IP reverse lookup, you don't know, but if you are, how many people are reviewing your firm, your company now that you don't even know about and rejecting you that you don't even know about? These are all tools you need to know if you're going to create a strategy. There's a reason why they look at you and go on. There's also a reason why they look at you and pick up the phone and call you. What are those reasons? Those are going to help you shape your strategy. The path to purchase you see on the right is true of anything you're selling. You, me, everybody. Somebody's got a problem. They look for solutions. They compare options. They decide to buy or not, and then they evaluate what happened afterwards. You're part of that path to purchase. You are. I am. So people know our firm as problem solvers. When they have a particular problem where we've solved before, guess who comes to their mind first, unless the relationship went south, which we know why it does or doesn't, right? And what do you learn from these things? It's very important. Pawn to king 4. How many chess players are out there listening to you? And you know this if you're a chess player. That pawn to king 4 is the standard opening, but what happens after that, there's just a variable choices, right? What's the object of chess? To checkmate the king, and you make moves to put yourself in a position to do that. But did you know that every move in chess and every move in business, you gain something and you lose something? Did you know that? That's true. Every move you make in business, you're going to gain something and you're going to lose something. And you got to know what those things are in order not only to hatch a strategy, but to checkmate the king, to get the account. You have to do it. You have to do it. And it's not, I wish I could tell you it's the same all the time. Why do you think Amazon changes their pricing with algorithms? Why? Because they know something's going on that they can't see, so they write digital programming to figure that out. Why do you think Amazon rose from a bookseller to be a guy that you can get something the same day you order it? How the heck does he make money? In business as on the battlefield, the object of strategy is to bring about the conditions most favorable to your side. Precisely judging the right moment to move or withdraw, always assessing the limits of compromise. Kenichi Ome, a director at McKinsey, wrote that in The Mind of the Strategist. It's not a bad book. But in that, he said, form the habit of analysis. In other words, always be listening, always be thinking, and adapt an intellectual elasticity. Be flexible. Ladies and gentlemen, if there were a proven formula, I would have given it to you by now. Somebody would have given it to us, right? There is no proven formula. There isn't. There's only anticipate, react, and adapt. And have an objective. What's your objective? To sell. How do you do that? Well, those are tactical decisions. Emails, direct mail, PR. Forget about that right now. We're talking about strategy. Objective, to sell. Strategy, what do? The steps to sell. Right? If you have questions, Jim at Interline Group, jim@interlinegroup.com. Your objective is to checkmate the king, get the account, and win. Isn't that true? Isn't it? How many of you want to lose? That's my objective, Jim, to lose. I want to lose. You do that every day. I do that every day. We use IP reverse lookup to track on our website who reads our blogs. Guess which blog is read the most week in and week out? I'm not kidding. You can interlinegroup.com. Go there. There's one blog that every week when we look at the metrics, every week this blog, without question, gets the most views and reads. 7 things to ask when you lose a pitch. 7 things to ask when you lose a pitch. Do you know who reads that blog a lot? Attorneys. I don't know why. I do know they read it. That's for me. Now, what, Jim, how does that affect your strategy? Well, first of all, it's being read. Secondly, I know I'm getting seen. Thirdly, it's a good blog. I use that strategy myself. Those are 7 questions to ask when you lose a pitch. And if you ask those 7 questions, you will always gain strategic advantage. You'll know why you lost. And you cannot lose. You can keep going there. So, strategy. Right? It's not just a plan. I've been to a lot of strategic meetings in my life, and strategy is judgment and action. It's not just writing out a plan. Most strategic planning sessions I've ever attended and was fortunate enough to direct are frankly a waste of time because they do all the right things, they put it down on paper, and then nothing happens. The reason you want to put a few things on paper is so you remind yourself every day what you're here for, right? Why are you here? What's your strategy? What's going to keep you in business? How come we lasted over 30 years? I still have to pinch myself. I have one message when I walk into my office every day for the last 30 plus years, right? I see it every day when I walk in. A day without work is a day without food. It's an ancient saying. A day without work is a day without food. And that's why I work. Because I like to eat. Strategic judgment means knowing when to act and when not to act. You can't just be firing your ammunition all the time, right? It's not about avoiding problems. It's about preparing for them. Preparation is 110% of the things we're talking about. Practice, practice, practice. Intellectual flexibility. If you have the proven formula, jim@interlinegroup.com. Email me. I want to know it. And if you don't want to share it, forget about it. Just get at it. I'm kidding. There is no such thing. So if you're going to do strategy, you have to open your mind. You can't think like you have before. Because if you had the proven strategy, you wouldn't be listening to this now, would you? Look at this. A cautious person, when it is time to act suddenly, doesn't know how to do it and is consequently wrong. That's the example I gave you of driving in a car and somebody turns in front of you. If you have not been a defensive driver, you won't know what to do. You can't. I don't know anybody who would disagree with me. Do you? I don't. So, you can read a lot of books about strategy, right? Good to great. It's a good book. It's okay. But it's about companies that have already figured it out, and you may pick up some tips, but that's not. Michael E. Porter is the standard, right? Competitive Advantage. You can read that. It's a big, thick book, but you're wasting your time. Competing on Analytics. That's another book, right? The New Science of Winning. Great. You can read all you want. It doesn't matter. It's about anticipating, reacting, and adapting. I didn't come up with those three words. I'm going to tell you who said that and where I learned it in a minute. But it's anticipating what the client needs, reacting to what the client needs, and then adapting when the client says, that's not what I need. Which, if it hasn't happened to you, then you haven't been in business long enough, right? Right? Erase your blackboard. John Locke said this. John Locke is a famous philosopher. He said, the reason you think what you think is because somebody wrote it on your blackboard. So just erase your blackboard, would you please? And that's the same thing true of strategy. I had talked to a guy once who said, direct mail never works. And I said, how do you know that? He said, because we tried it once and it didn't work. So obviously it doesn't work. I said, okay. So then after we convinced them it worked and we executed the direct mail campaign, he became a believer. You can't make judgments based on something you wrote on your blackboard or somebody wrote on your blackboard. You got to gain the experience of it through. You do. You have to gain it. And realizing, anticipate, reacting, and adapting is the key to the puzzle. You should be able to listen to everybody, just like I listened to that guy whose text I wrote, that I read to you, where he said he's got the proven system. No one has the proven system. Do they? Do they really? I want to know about it. The rules of branding. I didn't come up with these rules. The first brand into your brain gets twice the long-term market share. The second, twice again, and the third as much as the third, and so on and so on and so on. So the first brand in your brain, one of our first big clients was Sloan Valve out of Franklin Park. Long time client. We worked for that company for 20 years. It was a great relationship. Tremendous. We learned so much. We helped build their brands. Their brand, they used to have secret meetings and say they had, 90% market share. And I believe that because everywhere you go and use the public restroom 20 years ago, 30 years ago, all you saw was a Sloan Valve. All you saw was toilets and urinals. All you saw was a Sloan Valve. But then things happen. The market changed. There's disruption. Other companies come in. Their patents run out, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And now they no longer have that market share. That market share is shared by other big brands and so on. And you have an architectural firm, a designer firm. Are you number one? Are you number two? Gensler, huge firm, beautiful firm, big brand, right? And you're a little guy in Pittsburgh, right? How do you compete against a Gensler? Well, that's what we're talking about. We're going to look at some strategies to help you compete against Gensler. Not that we want to say anything bad about Gensler. They produce a beautiful newsletter. I'm on the distribution list. You should be too. Why? Because you want to know what your competitor's thinking. What's the saying you learned? Keep your enemies closer. Because there's tremendous advantages of being first. And I'm going to give you a little hint on how to be first, regardless of. I talked to an architect just the other day, and he said, Jim, there's nothing I do differently than any other architect in education. He designed schools. I said, really? Mike, tell me about that. So I listened to him for 10 minutes, and he was telling me what he did. I said, well, stop. And I was taking notes. You always take notes when you're listening. I hope you are. And I said, I played back to him some of the things he told me. And as I played back these things he told me, I said, what about this? What about that? Have you thought about this? I'm not going to tell you what this or that is because this is a unique situation. And when I finished a half hour later in discussion with him, he realized how wrong he was. He was not only doing something different than all other architects that he knew in the educational facility design. He now had differentiation to tell people about what he is doing differently. And therein lies the key to your strategy. Differentiation. You got to be different because otherwise you all look alike. Here's the four modes. This is courtesy of Al Rice and Jack Trout in their wonderful book. It's an old book, Warfare, Marketing Warfare. These are the four types of strategies that you could play, right? You can play anticipate, react, defensively, offensively, guerrilla, flanking. If you're a sports fan, offense, defense, right? Flanking, guerrilla, probably. There's some ways you can look at a football game and see guerrilla strategy. What's defensive? That's defensive is basically something happens and you react defensively. You're on the defense. Offense is when you charge, right? You attack the position of somebody. Flanking, you move around them. And guerrilla, you're just looking for little niches you can take. If you think of the American Revolution, the United States, before they became the United States, right? The Patriots fought guerrilla warfare against a very offensive British. They were the best in the world. Now, Jimmy, you're using a lot of warfare analogies, and I don't like that. Well, that's okay. It doesn't matter to me, but that's what marketing is. It's legitimate warfare. You're trying to kill the competition, right? You're trying to outsell them. You need their customers. You want to dominate. All those types of words. So I want you to think about this when we go over these, and I'm going to show you what I mean in the next slide. You play defensive strategies when you're the leader. You should only use defense. If you're not the leader, don't even think about doing a defensive strategy. Well, how does that work? Well, if you're the leader and somebody comes out with a product or a service that's different and new and you don't have it, just duplicate it. Because you're already the leader. You got the most market share. Don't go down to them. Make them come to you and nothing will happen. You'll still gain. You'll still be fine. You'll still be fine. Nothing will happen. Well, Jim, how do you know that? Because we've tried this. We've told companies you don't have to do this. Everything will be fine. I'll give you a good example. Advertising. In a recession, most people cut advertising, right? Some people, even when there's not a recession, don't cut advertising. They advertise, and those are the people who usually end up winning. Gray Bar started out as a small distributor, but they never stopped advertising through recessions, and now they're $1 billion company. I can give you example after example. But I'm talking about now, if you're a leader in the marketplace and somebody comes out with something, don't do anything. And I'll give you a good example, like advertising. Even in a good economy, some of our clients wanted to stop advertising. And we said, just stop advertising. There's no need to advertise. What do you mean? Nothing will happen. How do you know that? Because we've been through this before. So if you're the leader, you can play defense. If you're not the leader, don't even think about that strategy. Put it out of your mind. When should you use an offensive strategy? Well, that depends how strong the leader is that you're going to attack. We had a client who wanted to get into a certain market. We did research. Always do research before you decide on any of these strategies. We did research and we said, don't do it. He said, what do you mean don't do it? This was big, $100 million, a big company wanted to go into another market that they weren't in, the janitorial service market with their products. We said, don't do it. Why? Well, because you think your margins are bad. In this business, Jansen, it's pennies. You'll get killed. No. We're big. Everybody knows us. We're the market leader. We're charging ahead. Okay. We made a lot of money on that, but 2 years after we started, they had to withdraw because they got their ass kicked. Why? Not because they didn't listen to us, but because they didn't listen to what was in front of them. These people, it was a different market. You can't go in there as the leader in one market and then take over as the leader in another market. You can't do it. Very, very rare. So don't play offense unless you're sure. But there's other ways to play offense. There's another company that came into the country and played offense, but they did it delicately with a flanking strategy. We can talk about this another time. That's what flanking is coming in from the side, right? From the side, flank them. You heard that it's a higher price, right? Or in some cases, it's no price. That's what this company did to penetrate the market that I'm talking about. There was a big market leader with a couple of other minor players, and this company came into the United States and they basically gave away their projects to they gave away their products to very, very sizable products. And they bought their way. They flanked the leader. The leader didn't know what hit him. We had told the leader, because we worked for the leader, that they're coming. We had seen a report from one of the plants that was over in that country, and it was an amazing report. Right? It was an amazing report. This is the day, way before the internet. We shared it with them and say, listen, these are your enemies. They're coming. They're going to come. They didn't believe us, and that's one of the people that are playing there on that market as a leader. And then there's guerrilla warfare. So you see, your strategies really depend on the situation that you're looking at. That's where anticipate, reacting come in. You understand? So in your business, you face problems each and every day. How do you respond to this, by the way? And how do you answer the phone? Well, we don't answer the phone. We have automated attendants. That's not good. People love to talk to people. Stop the madness. I can't handle all the incoming calls. Well, figure out a way. When you lose a client, what do you do? When you win a client, what do you do? Your budget gets cut. What do you do? We had a client that stopped spending. This is $1 million client. They said in October, we have no money for November and December, so we can't use your services for 2 months. And I said, well, just what do you know that money stand in the way for using our services? And they looked at me like I was nuts. I said, you're a tremendous client. We love serving you. Don't worry about these 2 months. Do what you got to do for the disruption you're facing. Let us carry through on a cost basis. We won't cut back our services. We just won't charge you for our services. We'll charge you out of pocket. And let's go forward and hit next year running. That strategy I just explained to you kept the client for 5 more years. They never forgot that. So they wanted to forget, which is another story. So when a problem arises, your strategy should guide your response, right? If you have a strategy. If you don't have a strategy and something happens, you don't know what to do. So you panic and you make mistakes. Don't do that. Panic is the most important enemy of success. I don't know what to do. Should have already figured it out, right? If you read Sun Tzu, The Art of War, you should know the outcome of the battle before you even start. Not knowing what to do is a horrible feeling. Look at this. In the crash of 2009, Crane's business, right? Crane's Chicago business headline: executives are scared to death. Are you kidding? When I read that back then, I said, are you kidding? He's scared to death. What's to be afraid of is a downturn. But what's the worst that can happen to your business? That's always the premise of the strategy I start with. That's the point. You lose your business. Fear is one of the strongest emotions. So you have to eliminate the pause that fear causes. You cannot be afraid. And the only way you eliminate fear is to practice. What do they say in boxing? You're going to get hit when you go into the ring. So your strategy, of course, is not to get hit, but you're going to get hit. So your strategy is, what do you do after you get hit? What do you do after you get hit? That's strategy. That's strategy. I'm not going to belabor this slide. You can freeze this and look at it if you want. But it's really from the Marine Corps. What happens in war? Violent, unnerving sounds, casualties, confusion, lack of information, isolation. Well, it's horrible for veterans out there who've been through this, right? You know what this is like. You've been on the battlefield. If you've been in a fight at school, right? If you've been in a fight, unnerving sounds, casualties, maybe you got hit, right? Unnerving alerts. You get pings, constant interruptions in your business. These are all elements of disruption. They hurt your performance. They kill performance. These are the performance killers. Fatigue. Oh, I can't work anymore. I'm so tired. Get over it. Work out. Work out more. What's the worst thing that can happen in your business? This is one of my blogs. You should read it. You lose it. And when I was giving this to high school kids, one kid kept raising his hand and saying, I said, okay, so what's the worst thing? And he said, assassination. I go, what are you talking about? Assassination. I said, where are you from? He goes, the Philippines. I said, So okay, you can get assassinated. Never factored that into my thinking until I met this kid, which is true. So think about this. If you're in business, the worst thing, what can happen is you lose your business. Unless you're in the Philippines. You want to win. And how do you win? With strategy. Strategy is developed to deal with the things as they happen, not after they happen or before. Because if you don't have it, you're just reacting. You're just, you're taking up time. You're filling a seat. Always I don't care what your job is in the company. I don't really care. You always have to be thinking about how to make money, how to sell stuff. What are you doing today that's going to help the company? You have to think like that. Or is it all about you? Right? If you're thinking it's all about you, this course is not for you. This is about thinking about a central purpose to win for your company. So if you have strategy, you will react to the event based on the strategy. The worst thing that companies do today is they don't appoint a single spokesperson. You understand that? Everybody starts talking, disinformation spreads, and who the hell knows what the truth is. The personnel manual story is a short story. I was with a focus group, not a focus group, but a meeting of business people, and one person asked help in creating a personnel manual because they want to create one where the executives get paid differently than the other ones. And I said, right off the bat, I said, I don't know if it's kosher. And the other people started chiming in and saying, there's a way to do it, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, what about me? I said, my lawyer said that I don't need a personnel manual. Oh, my God, you don't have a personnel manual. This is crazy. How do you exist? You're going to get sued, blah, 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 blah. And then I explained to them why our attorney said you don't need it because he visited us, all our people at the time, and he talked to every one of them. And the conclusion was, Jim, you don't need a personnel manual the way you run your company because we keep timesheets. We talk to each other. The doors are always open. We always know what's going on. Strategy. We're always listening to each other. This is the chart I told you I would show you. This is the most important chart you're ever going to see in your life. And don't email me and send me a chart that you've seen that you think is better than this, because I won't believe you. Performance is that line. You see the line going there? And then suddenly there's initial impact of a disruptive event. That event could be a phone call. It could be you have a cold. It could be something that disrupts your performance. This is from really a supply chain thing, but forget about that. This is performance. It's everybody's performance, whether you're working out, whether you're working, whatever. When a disruptive event happens, your performance starts deteriorating. You see the line? Going down, 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 down. Recovery, you start going back up. And the time is on the bottom, right? The clock is ticking. You see the orange line? I believe that's orange. That's less recovery because you've been preparing for it. Your job as a business strategist is right here. Preparation. Practice, practice, practice to disruptive events. So you know when your client calls you to lunch and says one more mistake and you're done, and it's $100,000 account a month, you don't sit there and say, oh my God. You say, well, you might as well fire me now because I will make another mistake. I'm human. That's exactly what happened to me. Went to lunch. The client said, one more mistake, you're done, without hesitation. I said, well, fire me now because I will make a mistake. I'm human. I'm a human being. You can't mean that, said the client. I said, of course I do. Me or someone that works with me is going to make a mistake. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We recover from those mistakes very quickly. We pay for our mistakes, but we will make a mistake. Is that what you want me to tell the owners? Of course. Told the owners, got the call back, said, please list everything you do for us. I did. It took 10 double-spaced pages, both sides, to list all the work we were doing for them. And that was it. That was it. Never heard another peep. Never. The most valuable asset of a business, this is part of our strategy, are our people. Our people. And your people. Your people. Well, Jim, I'm the only person here. Well, then you're the most important to your business. It's your best asset. So every decision we make as a company has a strategic position in mind. We're debating now whether to withdraw from one piece of business that we have operated for the last 15 years. And we're evaluating that very carefully. Every day we talk about it, we think about it, we know what brought us here, what gave us success, but guess what? The world changes. It's being disrupted. Now, if I tell you what that business is, first of all, you wouldn't believe me because you think I'm a marketing guy, which I am. I'm an advertising guy, which I am. I'm a strategy guy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we also sell a product. We have an e-commerce site that we sell a heck of a lot of this product. And we've been selling it for a long, long, long time. And that's another long story, but I'm not going to waste your time. We are in business to make money. What are you in business for? To help people? To save the world? No. You're in business to make money. So how do you do that without people if you're in the service business? And I told you when we started, I don't care what your business is. You're in the service business. You cannot automate service. You can't do it. Even financial, situation, financially, like TD Ameritrade. You can read some blogs I wrote about these people, not names, but there's so many people in a business. How the hell you control, 1,000 people that work in your company? Well, you do it one at a time. You have to set the tone. You do it, not me, you. And they all have to be singing from the same hymn book, the same strategy. Look at Home Depot, how Home Depot came into the market and killed all these companies and became Home Depot that we know today. Look at Amazon, as we mentioned. Look at any of these companies. Look at Walmart. They were in Arkansas at a little store, for heaven's sakes. And then their strategy set them on a path. Not that I'm saying you have to be as big as Walmart. But in your own world, you can be a huge success with the right strategy. I want to introduce you with the time left to some strategy pros. There's 4 people here. Speed and development is the very first law. Every piece must be developed in one move. It's a chess statement. Aaron Nimzovich wrote that in his book. He's a great chess master. Speed and development is the first law. Every piece must be developed in one move. So speed is essential in your strategy once you have a strategy. And what is your strategy? To solve the problem neatly, quickly, efficiently. The next quote, the SEALs do place a premium on brute strength, right? But there's an even bigger premium on speed. Marcus Luttrell, the lone survivor, wrote a book, was in a movie, right? They made a movie about him. Great guy. I saw him personally. I have a signed copy of his book. Just a terrific, terrific guy. Right? They place a premium on speed. The first rule of flight control is if you don't know what to do, don't do anything. Gene Kranz wrote a great book, Failure is Not an Option. It's a good read. Why did he write that? Because if you do the wrong thing, you kill people. That's the same thing in strategy. If you have the wrong strategy, if you don't know what to do, don't do anything. But if you don't know what to do, you haven't really done your strategy. Because if you have a strategy, you know exactly what to do. And then it's your job to do it quickly, neatly, and efficiently. Don't waste time. And finally, anticipate, react, and adapt. From this guy, Alexander the Great, who was pretty great, by the way, because he conquered most of the world. Right? He was. Anticipate, react. Just read about these guys. So think about this. Strategy is created to set up conditions to win. Like chess, business, and everything else, every move you make has an advantage and a disadvantage. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Whenever companies or individuals compete for an essential resource, like customers, sooner or later, one company displaces the other. You're going to win or lose for that building you're trying to design. You're going to win or lose. Now, how you win or lose is determined by your strategy. Never, ever give up. Ever. As Elmer Letterman said, the sale begins when the customer says no. So what determines if you're displaced or you are the displacer? Well, strategy though. Strategy though. No two companies can coexist and make a living in the identical way. Now, you might think that all businesses like yours are alike, but that's not true, as I told you about with the architect. You're all different. You're like fingerprints. I don't know who's listening to this now because this is a recording, but hopefully when I give some of these things in person or online, live, I don't know. I don't know what you're like, right? But you're not like the other guy listening to this. There's something different about you, just like there's something different about us that kept us in business despite all these huge agencies. Now, we're competing with people inside companies because they brought all this stuff inside and they think they know what they're doing. Because of what? Our new employee. If you went to our website and you looked at our leadership page, who's working for us, we've got a new employee, Mr. AI, right? Artificial intelligence. Why do they call it artificial? Because it's not real. But I'm telling you, it's the future for you and for me. And it's very dangerous and very, very exciting and very disruptive. So you either use disruption to your advantage, or it's going to use you and eat you up. Make judgments on what to do, when to do it, what you should be doing. If the marketplace doesn't want your services, there's nothing you can do that will convince them of that. So your services have to be comprised of what you think they want. And what do they want? That has been true for us for 31 years. Neatly, quickly, efficiently. We've always been able to move fast. And now, with technology, we can move even faster. Faster. So, encompass what people want, not what you have to offer. Differentiation may be pricing function, etc. The purpose of your strategy is to overcome hesitation. Write down your strategy and test your strategy repeatedly. Practice, practice, practice. Ask yourself, why are you doing this? Why are you sending out that X post? Why are you publishing on LinkedIn? Why are you responding? Right? Give people what they want. And that's it. Now, I've got some questions I've prepared. I'm going to ask two of them. We have a few minutes. Well, I had somebody prepare the question. You quoted General Mattis about the illusion of control. How do we balance digital tools with the need for human judgment and strategy? So how do you balance digital tools? Well, tools like IP reverse lookup will give you the data. But only you, people, can give wisdom. That's one of the things we find out with the experimentation with AI that we're doing. AI is very quick. It has the internet at its disposal, right? But every AI tool that we've used always has a disclaimer: we can make mistakes. And if you read them carefully and you know what the hell you're talking about, it does make mistakes. Only people can overcome them, right? People are the ones who bring wisdom to it. Mattis has warned us about overconfidence, right? You think you're reading something in a tweet or a report that's true because you don't have the experience to know it's true. You know one of Mattis's secrets of success? Should I share that with you? If we have time to read Call Sign Chaos. He had boots on the ground. He had people in the field that would tell him what the digital dashboards were not telling him. I had a client once I walked in, called me in his office, business development manager. He says, why did you charge us $50,000 last month for this service? I said, what? He says, it says here that you charge us $50,000 for this service. What the heck is that for? I said, I said, John, I can tell you right now, we didn't charge you. I know what we to the penny what we charged you. We didn't charge you that. Well, it says here you did. I said, what are you looking at? He says, come here, I'll show you. So I went around his desk. He's looking at his dashboard, and there's a line item there that says Interline, $50,000 for it, right? I said, it's not true. He said, what do you mean it's not true? Here it is. I'm looking at it. I said, I don't want to embarrass you, but it's not true. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to go verify it. But what I'd like you to do, you want me to go walk down to the accounting department myself? No. I'll go check with them. I said, but it's not true. If you go down and talk to Joanna in accounting, because I knew pretty much everybody, I said, she'll tell you that that's a mistake. That's a human error. Not my error, but somebody in your accounting department, like they had 15 people. It's a big company. All right. Next day, I walked in. Hey, John, how you doing? Listen, Jim, you were right. I said, well, I didn't mean to argue with you. No, you were right. It was our error. Dashboards lie. Dashboards lie. Not intentionally, but there's such a thing as human error. So you got to understand that digital technology, especially AI. I had a client who told me that 2023 is the last year that we will be able to believe our own eyes on computers. You know what? He's right. He was right. How do you know whatever the hell you're looking at is real? You're listening. How do you know I'm real? No, I'm real. I'm real. I can have somebody come in and pinch me if you want. All right. One more question. We got one more. You emphasize listening as a lost art, suggested passing along opportunities to others. How can that mindset be cultivated in a competitive business culture where everyone's chasing the same client? That's a great question, isn't it? Why should I give someone else the lead that I have? Well, I can think of many reasons. First of all, you don't do the service. You don't do it. Secondly, when you pass it along, that person will remember it forever, right? Is that true? When you pass along an opportunity, that person will remember it forever. It's goodwill. And then what? They'll owe you. Listening is a strategic differentiator, right? That's all we're talking about. It differentiates yourself. Clients remember who made them feel heard. I'm sorry about that. Oh, go back. Clients remember these things, right? I remember when I was giving a speech I was giving an NKBA presentation of one of my CEUs. I think it was in Kansas City, and the projector didn't work. Nothing worked. You know, I said, don't worry, I'll wing it. So I was running around making copies of my presentation at the copier at the facility we were at, and I gave everybody a copy, and then I winged it. They never forgot that. They never forgot that presentation. I still get emails. I got one email last year from the person who attended that, thanking me for that presentation and asking me my opinion about a situation. Make the most of the situation. That's what we're talking about when you give people the benefit of your experience. That's how you give back to the community, right? And giving a lead that you can't do to someone who can do it puts them in your debt. They're beholden to you then, right? They will. Thank you. Design meets strategy. Thanks for being part of this conversation. If you have questions about this seminar, contact me, Jim Nowakowski, Jim@interlinegroup.com, Jim@interlinegroup.com. You want a copy of the slides? Send me an email, right? Or call me, 358-4848, 847-358-4848. You can find me and just Google at Interline Jim. I'm everywhere. Go to our website, read my blogs. There's plenty of information. And thanks so much for being here. Hopefully, let's see, what time? Just at the 59-minute mark. Perfect for the credit. If you're seeking credit, you need a certificate, send me the information and we'll take care of it. Thanks for being here. Talk to you soon.